Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. The room is dim, lit by the soft glow of a single lamp. It smells of antiseptic and fear. Several women are gathered, their faces a mixture of apprehension and forced resolve. They are here for an initiation. A ceremony, they've been told, is a profound act of commitment to a secret sisterhood, a path to empowerment. One woman is instructed to lie naked on a massage table. The others hold her down, gripping her arms and legs. She has been told this is to support her, to help her through an ordeal that will test her strength. She has given her word. She has provided collateral. There is no backing out now. A doctor, also a member of this sisterhood, approaches with a tool. It's a cauterizing pen, a device that burns flesh with surgical precision. There is no anesthetic. The woman on the table is told the pain is part of the process, a way to purge weakness. Then the burning begins. The pen sears a symbol into her skin, just below her hip. The process is slow, deliberate, taking 20 to 30 minutes. The smell of her own burning flesh fills the small room. Her sisters hold her tight, whispering encouragements that sound more like commands, telling her to think of her master, to feel the pain as pleasure. When it is over, she is marked for life, branded not just with a symbol, but with the initials of the man at the top of the pyramid. A man none of them were supposed to know was in control. How does it come to this? How do intelligent, successful, often wealthy women find themselves in a suburban home in upstate New York, willingly submitting to being branded like cattle? This wasn't a backwoods commune disconnected from society. This was a sophisticated organization that presented itself as a premier executive coaching program, drawing in celebrities, entrepreneurs, and the children of political dynasties. The answer is not simple, and it reveals a terrifying blueprint for modern psychological manipulation. Today, on Anatomy of Crime, we dissect the insidious architecture of control that was NXIVM. This is not just the story of a cult leader and his followers. It is the story of a meticulously designed system that used the language of therapy, the structure of multi-level marketing, and the promise of self-improvement to create a hidden world of abuse. We will explore the anatomy of a modern coercive cult, one that flourished not in the shadows, but in the bright, inviting light of the self-help industry. To understand the complex machine of NXIVM, we must first understand its architect, Keith Raniere. Born in Brooklyn in 1960 and raised in the suburbs of New York, Raniere was, by all accounts, an unusual child. He was quiet, socially awkward, but possessed a precocious intelligence. He was a proficient pianist and a judo enthusiast. His parents separated when he was young, a detail his followers would later see as the source of a profound wound that drove his supposed quest to understand human relationships. He would later build a mythos around himself, claiming to have been a child prodigy who spoke in full sentences at age 1, read by age 2, and mastered advanced mathematics and multiple languages before he was a teenager. He claimed his IQ was tested at 240, a score so high it's statistically improbable to the point of being meaningless. This self-constructed legend was the cornerstone of the NXIVM belief system. To his followers, he wasn't just a smart man. He was arguably the smartest man in the world. He was given the title Vanguard, the one who would lead humanity into a more noble and ethical future. This manufactured genius was his primary tool of persuasion. It created an immediate power imbalance. In any room, in any conversation, he was positioned as the ultimate authority, the one whose logic was unassailable. To question him was not just to disagree, it was to reveal your own intellectual and ethical inferiority. Before he was Vanguard, however, he was a salesman. In 1990, Raniere started a company called Consumers Buyline Inc., or CBI. On the surface, it was a discount buying club, a multi-level marketing company that promised members huge savings on everything from electronics to groceries. It was a pyramid scheme, and a remarkably successful one for a time. He recruited thousands of people with the promise of financial freedom. He was charismatic, persuasive, and projected an aura of absolute certainty. He told people he had developed a revolutionary economic model that would change the world. But like most pyramid schemes, CBI was a house of cards. The business model was unsustainable, relying on an endless stream of new recruits to pay the promised returns to those higher up. By 1993, the company was under investigation by attorneys general in multiple states. They found that less than 1% of members ever made a profit. Most lost money. The company was eventually shut down, declared an illegal pyramid scheme by the New York Attorney General, and forced to pay a settlement. Raniere, however, never admitted fault. He blamed external forces, a hostile world that wasn't ready for his genius. It was a narrative he would perfect in the years to come. He was the visionary, and any failure or criticism was the work of lesser, malevolent people. CBI was a dress rehearsal. It taught him how to build a pyramid, how to sell an impossible promise, and how to cultivate unwavering loyalty in the face of external attack. He just needed a new product. In 1998, Keith Raniere found the perfect partner to help him sell his new product, himself. He met Nancy Salzman, a respected nurse and practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, a controversial method of psychotherapy and communication. Salzman was intelligent, ambitious, and searching for something more. She was captivated by Raniere's intellect and his grand vision for humanity. She saw in him a once-in-a-generation mind, and he saw in her the perfect vehicle for his ideas. She brought an air of therapeutic legitimacy and professional credibility that he desperately needed. To her, Raniere wasn't a failed pyramid scheme operator. He was a philosopher king. Together, they founded executive success programs. Or especially, the company was headquartered in Colony, a suburb near Albany, New York. Its product was a series of expensive, intensive workshops that promised to unlock human potential, eradicate self-limiting beliefs, and help people achieve their goals. The core curriculum was a 5-day or 16-day intensive, costing thousands of dollars. They used a proprietary methodology they called rational inquiry, which they claimed was a groundbreaking scientific tool for understanding human behavior. In reality, it was a repackaged blend of NLP, Scientology-like auditing sessions, and Raniere's own pseudoscientific philosophies. The workshops were grueling. Students would spend up to 16 hours a day in a windowless room, dissecting their deepest fears and traumas in front of a group of strangers. They were taught a new vocabulary, a specific jargon that isolated them from the outside world. Problems were disintegrations, emotional attachments were attachments, and critics were labeled suppressives. They were taught that their anxieties and failures were the result of their own flawed programming or imprints from childhood. Raniere and his trainers, called proctors, were the only ones who could help them fix it. This process, which they called exploration of meaning, or M, was the central ritual of especially. A person would be guided by a proctor to relive a traumatic or difficult memory over and over, with the goal of finding its root and neutralizing its emotional power. But these sessions often became intense, tear-filled interrogations that broke people down emotionally, leaving them vulnerable and highly suggestible. The structure of ESP was pure multi-level marketing, refined from Raniere's days at Consumer's Byline. Once you completed a course, you were heavily encouraged to recruit others. Success within the organization was measured not just by personal growth, but by how many people you brought into the fold. The organization also had a visual hierarchy. Members wore colored sashes, similar to a martial arts belt system, to signify their rank. An orange sash was for beginners, green for coaches, and higher colors for the leadership. This created a powerful aspirational dynamic. Everyone could see who was more evolved, who was closer to the inner circle, and who had the ear of Vanguard. It gamified enlightenment, turning the pursuit of self-awareness into a competitive climb up a pyramid, with Keith Raniere sitting alone at the summit. The entire system was designed to create dependency. The high cost of the courses often put students into debt, making them financially reliant on the organization to earn that money back through recruiting. The intense emotional experiences bonded them to the group and isolated them from friends and family who couldn't understand the new language they were speaking or the new person they were becoming. NXIVM, the umbrella organization for ESP and its various offshoots, wasn't just a series of workshops. It was a complete ecosystem, a parallel society with its own rules, its own language, and its own messiah. It offered a powerful sense of community and purpose to those who felt lost, and for many, for a time, it seemed to work. They felt more confident, more focused, more in control of their lives. They believed they were part of an elite group of ethical humanitarians changing the world. They had no idea what that change would ultimately cost them. A cult is only as powerful as its most committed followers, and Keith Raniere was a master at identifying and cultivating devotion in influential people. His inner circle wasn't a collection of lost souls. It was a high-powered board of directors who provided him with legitimacy, money, and access. At the top, beside Raniere, was Nancy Salzman. Known as Prefect, she was the co-founder and president of NXIVM. She was the maternal, therapeutic face of the organization. If Raniere was the distant, philosophical father figure, Salzman was the nurturing mother. She conducted the M sessions, trained the proctors, and managed the day-to-day operations. Her belief in Raniere was absolute, and her loyalty gave countless others permission to believe as well. She wasn't just a follower. She was a true believer who became a willing enforcer of his will. Her daughter, Lauren Salzman, grew up within the organization and became one of its highest-ranking members. She was seen as NXIVM royalty, groomed from a young age to be a leader. Her devotion to Raniere was filial and intense. She saw him as a surrogate father, a mentor who held the key to her self-worth. This deep emotional dependency would later make her a key player in the cult's most extreme practices, a tragic figure who was both a victim of Raniere's manipulation and a perpetrator of abuse against other women. Then there were the Bronfman sisters, Claire and Sarah, heiresses to the immense Seagram liquor fortune. They discovered NXIVM in the early 2000s, searching for purpose beyond their famous family name. Claire was a competitive equestrian, and Sarah was seeking her own path, In Keith Raniere, they found a figure who didn't seem to care about their money, only their potential. He offered them a mission. They quickly became some of his most dedicated and important followers. Their wealth was the financial engine that powered NXIVM's expansion and, more importantly, its aggression. The Bronfmans bankrolled the organization, reportedly pouring over $150 million into Raniere's various projects and legal battles. When journalists, former members or critics began to speak out against NXIVM, it was Bronfman money that funded a relentless and terrifying campaign of litigation. They hired top-tier law firms and private investigators to harass, intimidate, and bankrupt anyone perceived as an enemy. They filed lawsuits not to win, but to inflict maximum financial and psychological pain. This strategy, known as litigation abuse, created a powerful chilling effect. It sent a clear message to anyone thinking of leaving or speaking out. We have unlimited resources, and we will destroy you. The Bronfman sisters became the iron fist of NXIVM, enforcing loyalty through fear and financial ruin. Perhaps the most public face of NXIVM's inner circle was Allison Mack, an actress best known for her role as a wholesome sidekick on the hit television show Smallville. Mack joined NXIVM around 2006. She was at a crossroads in her career, feeling unfulfilled and searching for greater meaning. NXIVM offered her a compelling alternative to the superficiality of Hollywood. Raniere targeted her specifically, recognizing the immense value a celebrity spokesperson could bring. He flattered her, told her she was more than just an actress, that she had the potential to be a world historical figure. Mack became one of his most fervent disciples. She rose quickly through the ranks, her fame making her an incredibly effective recruiter, especially among other actors. She was charismatic and convincing. She genuinely believed that Raniere's teachings were making her a better person, and that she was helping others by bringing them into the fold. She became so enmeshed that her identity seemed to merge with the organization. She wasn't just a member. She was a high-ranking lieutenant, a trusted confidant of Vanguard himself. It was this devotion and proximity to power that would lead her to become the chief architect of the cult's most depraved and secret society. Together, this inner circle, the therapeutic mother, the loyal daughter, the billionaire enforcers, and the celebrity recruiter, created an impenetrable fortress around Keith Raniere, insulating him from criticism and accountability while amplifying his power exponentially. For years, NXIVM operated as a high-control group, using established techniques of psychological manipulation. But as Raniere's power became more absolute, his methods of control escalated into something far more sinister and personal. The architecture of coercion became more explicit, more demanding, and ultimately more dangerous. A key turning point was the formalization of a practice that had been happening informally for years, the collection of collateral. Initially, this was framed as a therapeutic tool. To join some of the more advanced and exclusive groups within NXIVM, members were required to hand over something deeply compromising. It could be a written confession to a fabricated crime, a nude photograph, or a letter detailing dark family secrets. It might be signed legal documents, transferring assets, or giving away power of attorney. The official justification was that this was an act of ultimate trust and commitment. By giving the group something that could destroy your life, you were demonstrating your resolve to stick with the program and overcome your issues. It was a way to create leverage over your own self-sabotaging behaviors. If you felt weak or wanted to quit, The group could use your collateral to remind you of your commitment. But the true purpose of collateral was blackmail. It was a tool of pure control, a guarantee of silence and obedience. Once NXIVM had your collateral, you were trapped. Leaving the group or speaking out against Raniere was no longer an option, because to do so meant risking the public release of your most humiliating secrets or facing financial and legal ruin. This practice fundamentally changed the dynamic within the group. It moved from the realm of persuasion to pure coercion. Consent became a meaningless concept because the threat of catastrophic consequences loomed over every decision. Alongside this, Raniere began to exert increasing control over the most intimate aspects of his followers' lives, particularly the women in his inner circle. He implemented and enforced extreme low-calorie diets, sometimes restricting women to as few as 500 to 800 calories a day. This was framed as a disciplinary practice to build character and eliminate childlike attachments to food. The real effect, however, was physical and psychological debilitation. Starvation causes cognitive impairment, emotional instability, and physical weakness. It made his followers more docile, more dependent, and less capable of critical thought. He controlled their bodies to control their minds. He also systematically controlled their relationships. He dictated who they could date, often breaking up couples if he felt a partner was a suppressive influence, or if he wanted the woman for himself. Over time, he cultivated a rotating harem of women from within his followers. He framed these sexual relationships not as personal affairs, but as part of their spiritual and ethical development. Sex with Vanguard was portrayed as a profound teaching, a way for them to work through their issues around men, power, and sexuality. He was their master, their teacher, and sleeping with him was the ultimate lesson. Any jealousy or discomfort they felt was simply evidence of their own ethical failings. Another disintegration they needed to out of their system. Through the collection of collateral, the control of diet, and the manipulation of sexual relationships, Raniere stripped his followers of their autonomy piece by piece. He isolated them, weakened them, and trapped them in a web of fear and dependency. He was no longer just a guru. He was a master preparing his slaves. The final and most horrific evolution of NXIVM's system of control was the creation of a secret society within the already secretive organization. It was called DOS, an acronym for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, a Latin phrase that roughly translates to master over obedient female companions. This was the inner sanctum, the dark heart of the cult. To the outside world, and even to most NXIVM members, it did not exist. Its existence was a closely guarded secret, known only to its members and to the man at the very top of its pyramid, Keith Raniere. The recruitment for DOS was handled primarily by Allison Mack. She approached women within NXIVM, women she knew were loyal, vulnerable, and seeking a deeper level of commitment. She sold DOS to them as a secret sorority, a fierce women's empowerment group designed to help them become their strongest, most actualized selves. She told them it was a way to overcome their weaknesses, especially those related to men and relationships. She never mentioned Keith Raniere's involvement. This was presented as a women-only organization, a lie that was crucial for recruitment. To join, prospective members were required to provide ongoing monthly collateral. This was far more extensive than what had been asked for in other NXIVM groups. They had to turn over naked photos, videos of themselves confessing damaging secrets, and deeds to their family homes. They were told this collateral would only ever be seen by the other women in the group, and would be held in trust. Once a woman was in, the true nature of dose was revealed. It was a master-slave pyramid. Each woman was a slave, who had to recruit her own set of slaves beneath her, becoming their master. This structure ensured rapid growth and absolute loyalty, as each master was responsible for enforcing the rules on the slaves below her. The ultimate master of all the women, the one they called Grand Master, was Keith Raniere. Allison Mack was his second-in-command. The women were now his property. Life within Dose was a regimen of systematic dehumanization. Slaves were expected to be available to their masters 24 hours a day. They had to respond to texts immediately, day or night, with the phrase, "Yes, master." They were given assignments designed to break their will and instill absolute obedience. These included menial tasks, periods of forced fasting, and taking cold showers. They were put on even more severe calorie-restricted diets, with the goal of achieving a body type that Raniere found attractive, extremely thin, with no body fat. They were ordered to seduce Raniere, and were expected to be sexually available to him whenever he commanded. If they hesitated or failed in any of their duties, their collateral was weaponized against them. Their masters would threaten to release their secrets, a constant and terrifying form of psychological torture. The culmination of this process was the branding. This was the initiation for all Dose slaves. They were told it was a symbolic tattoo representing the elements. In reality, it was a brand, seared into their flesh with a cauterizing pen without anesthetic. The ritual was performed in a group setting, where other women would hold the person down. The symbol they were branded with was a complex design that, when viewed from a certain angle, subtly incorporated the initials K and R. They were permanently marked as the property of Keith Raniere. This was the final act of ownership, a physical manifestation of the psychological bondage he had engineered. Dose was the endgame of the entire NXIVM philosophy. It took the language of empowerment, commitment, and overcoming weakness, and twisted it into a justification for slavery. It was a perfect, self-policing system of abuse, where the victims were forced to become the perpetrators, all for the benefit of one man. For nearly 2 decades, NXIVM operated with seeming impunity. The lawsuits, the intimidation, and the wall of secrecy kept most dissenters silent. But in 2017, the wall began to crumble. The catalyst was a woman who had been part of the inner circle, a Canadian actress named Sarah Edmondson. She had been a devoted and high-ranking member for over a decade, a true believer who had built a successful NXIVM center in Vancouver when she was invited by her master, Lauren Salzman, to join the secret sisterhood of DOS. She saw it as the ultimate honor. She endured the horrifying branding ritual, believing it was a profound act of personal growth. The turning point came when she discovered the truth about the brand. Another member revealed to her that the symbol contained Keith Raniere's initials. The realization was devastating. This wasn't a women's empowerment group. It was a cult designed to serve one man, and she bore his mark on her body. The lie was so profound, so absolute, that it shattered the reality she had inhabited for 12 years. Overcoming immense fear of retaliation and the release of her own collateral, Sarah Edmondson made the courageous decision to leave and to speak out. She contacted Barry Meyer, an investigative reporter at the New York Times. Her story, along with those of other former members like Mark Vicente, a filmmaker who had been with NXIVM since its early days, and Catherine Oxenberg, an actress whose daughter India was deeply enmeshed in the cult, became the basis for a bombshell exposé published in October 2017. The article, titled "Inside a Secretive Group Where Women Are Branded," laid bare the dark secrets of DOS for the first time. It detailed the master-slave relationships, the collection of collateral, the extreme diets, and the horrific branding rituals. The story was shocking, and it ripped away the carefully constructed facade of executive success programs. The New York Times article was the crack in the dam. It gave other women the courage to come forward, and corroborated the stories that many former members had been trying to tell for years. Law enforcement, which had previously been hesitant to investigate what seemed like a fringe but consensual organization, could no longer ignore the mounting evidence of serious crimes. The Federal Bureau of Investigation launched a full-scale criminal investigation. As the authorities closed in, Keith Raniere fled. Accompanied by Allison Mack and a few other loyalists, he escaped to a luxury villa in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. He believed he was untouchable, protected by a different legal system and his network of powerful friends. But his time as Vanguard was over. In March 2018, Mexican federal police, working with the FBI, raided his villa. He was arrested, looking disheveled and bewildered, and extradited back to the United States to face justice. The architect of control had finally lost it. The women he had victimized, the ones he had branded and blackmailed into silence, were about to find their voice in a federal courtroom. The trial of Keith Raniere began in May 2019 in the Eastern District of New York Federal Court in Brooklyn. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Moira Penza, laid out a sweeping case against him. The charges were staggering: racketeering, sex trafficking, forced labor conspiracy, wire fraud, and identity theft. The government's argument was that NXIVM was not a self-help organization but a criminal enterprise, with Raniere as its kingpin. Over the course of the 6-week trial, the jury would hear a story of manipulation and abuse that was almost beyond belief. The prosecution's case was built on the testimony of the victims. One by one, women who had once revered Raniere as a godlike figure took the stand to describe the reality of their lives inside his cult. They were intelligent, articulate women from all walks of life: actresses, business owners, heiresses. Their stories painted a chilling and consistent picture of coercive control. A key witness was a woman known only by her first name, Daniela. She had been confined to a room for nearly 2 years as punishment for developing feelings for another man. Her testimony, which included the reading of her desperate, heartbreaking letters to Raniere, was a powerful indictment of his cruelty. Another crucial witness was Lauren Salzman. As one of the highest-ranking members of DOS and Nancy Salzman's daughter, her testimony was a betrayal of the highest order to the NXIVM faithful. On the stand, she broke down, describing in granular detail the inner workings of DOS. She explained how she was forced to groom other women for Raniere, how she held them to their slave vows under threat of releasing their collateral, and how she participated in the branding rituals. Her testimony was a look inside the mind of someone who was both a victim and a perpetrator, illustrating the impossible psychological trap Raniere had created. She admitted her own complicity, but made it clear that every action was orchestrated and directed by Raniere. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence to support the testimony. They showed the jury the explicit collateral photos and videos. They displayed emails and text messages in which Raniere and his lieutenants discussed the slave-master dynamic. They even presented evidence of the brand itself, explaining its design and its connection to Raniere's initials. The defense, meanwhile, was faced with an impossible task. Their central argument was one of consent. They claimed that everything that happened within NXIVM and DOS, including the sex, the branding, and the collateral, was consensual among adults. They portrayed the women not as victims, but as willing participants in an alternative lifestyle. But the prosecution systematically dismantled this defense. They argued that there can be no true consent in an environment of extreme coercive control. They explained that when a person's life is controlled through blackmail, starvation, sleep deprivation, and psychological manipulation, their ability to freely choose is compromised. The women may have said yes, but they did so under the threat of having their lives destroyed if they said no. After 6 weeks of harrowing testimony, the jury took less than 5 hours to deliberate. On June 19, 2019, they found Keith Raniere guilty on all counts. The verdict was a total victory for the prosecution and a profound validation for the women who had risked everything to speak out. In the aftermath, the other key figures of NXIVM's inner circle also faced their reckoning. To avoid trial, most of them pleaded guilty. Allison Mack pleaded guilty to racketeering and racketeering conspiracy charges, tearfully apologizing for her role in manipulating women into DOS. Nancy Salzman, the prefect, pleaded guilty to racketeering conspiracy. Claire Bronfman, the heiress who funded the cult's legal terror campaign, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to conceal and harbor an alien for financial gain and fraudulent use of identification. One by one, the pillars of Raniere's empire crumbled. In October 2020, Keith Raniere, the man they called Vanguard, stood before a judge for sentencing. He remained defiant, showing no remorse. The judge sentenced him to 120 years in prison, a life sentence, ensuring he would never again be in a position to harm anyone. The story of NXIVM is a chilling case study in the anatomy of modern psychological coercion. It thrived by wrapping its abuse in the aspirational and therapeutic language of our time. It wasn't a cult of robed figures on a distant compound. It was a cult of business suits and yoga pants, operating out of suburban conference rooms and luxury homes. Keith Raniere didn't need a remote jungle to isolate his followers. He used a sophisticated system of social, financial, and psychological pressure to achieve the same result in the middle of modern society. He weaponized the very tools of self-improvement, workshops, personal coaching, the pursuit of a better self, and turned them into instruments of control. NXIVM's structure was a predatory hybrid, blending the evangelical fervor of a religion, the recruitment model of a pyramid scheme, and the lexicon of pop psychology. It offered a seductive promise to ambitious, intelligent people, a secret, more ethical path to success and fulfillment that only they were privileged enough to access. Raniere understood a fundamental vulnerability in the human condition, the search for meaning and purpose. He presented himself as the answer, a transcendent genius who could solve the puzzle of their lives. Once inside, members were systematically stripped of their critical thinking, their financial independence, and their personal relationships, until their entire world revolved around Raniere and his teachings. The final brutal innovation of DOS and the branding ritual reveals the ultimate goal. It was never about empowerment. It was about ownership. The brand on their skin was the physical manifestation of the psychological chains he had spent years forging. It's a terrifying reminder that the desire for a guru, for someone to provide all the answers, can lead down a path not to enlightenment, but to enslavement. The legacy of NXIVM is a warning. It demonstrates that coercion doesn't always look like a gun to the head. It can look like a supportive friend, an inspiring mentor, or a life-altering seminar. It can wear the mask of love and the promise of a better you. The most insidious forms of control are not those that are forced upon us from the outside, but those that convince us that the cage we are in is a sanctuary we have freely chosen. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.